Rather than discussing the theories of revelation, I skip that topic and keep it for a physical class because it takes generally 2 classes to study those theories. Rather, we will study a case of insurgency that is very much related to the history of Bengal, right? So
Right, one of the
today we will
ancient এরকম
see
লাগতেছে।
one practical case of insurgency, that is the Naxalite movement. Now it will be a very small class. We will see the history of Naxalite movement uh, in a very concise manner. It's a very prolonged. It has a prolonged history. The history is very complex, and the history, when there is politics, there are multiple parties in a conflict. You see, you cannot interpret in black and white. Rather, it's like a mesh rather than it's a straight line, right? So we will try to understand that history or the basic of that history. Now, Sahara, did you raise hand? কিছু বলবা? Okay. The Naxalite movement started back in 1967. You can see in this map. Uh,
না না
this
দেয় না।
is the map of India. Here is Bangladesh, and this is West Bengal. All right, and the Naxalbari, the area is here. This is our North Bengal, right? You can see the shape. This is our North Bengal, and Naxalbari is in this area, very close to the border of the northern tip of West Bengal, right? So it started back in 1967. It represents the struggle. It started as a struggle of peasants, or you can call it started as a peasant movement, কৃষক আন্দোলন যেটাকে আমরা বলি, এরকম একটা আন্দোলন. However, the government forces, when it took a military turn, when it took the turn of insurgency or terrorism, it was labeled, this movement, these people were labeled as terrorists or anti-state elements. So sometimes they were calling them terrorists. As you know, there is no clear-cut definition of terrorism. Rather, we have interpretation and use of that interpretation at the disposal of people who are in powers uh, to label the term terrorists, right? Now, although it started in West Bengal, it spread across India, particularly in Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and these uh, this movement was very much strong in Adivasi area, right, where the Adivasi or the tribal people, whom we call, this movement was stronger in this area. Now, if you look at the beginning of this, if you look at the causes of this movement, we can find that there was huge gap between the indigenous people of India and the British people during the period. However, if you look back before British period, as you know, in India there is a caste system, and that caste system almost dictates everything because it's a system that is within the socio-political and economic practice, although it is called that it's based on religion. However, it dictates every aspect of your life. If you are someone from upper caste, you will get respect, you will get opportunities. If you will have the opportunity to study, you will have people come and sit with you, discuss with you. Uh, if you are from lower caste or from a different religion, you will have very much difficult time. For instance, we had a teacher in this department. Fuad al-Mannan. Now, his family is very much educated. His grandfather was a graduate of Kolkata University, if I'm not wrong. So he once told me a story that when my grandfather used to travel mm, from here to Kolkata in the areas where Hindus are prominent, and if he had to eat somewhere, he could not enter to most of the restaurants because most of the restaurants were Hindu hotels, right? And in most of the places, Brahmins were eating, so they wouldn't let allow some Muslims. So he had to wait outside of that restaurant and ask for someone, and if someone would come and take bring him some food, right, he had to eat it there. So this was the struggle, and uh, I mean, he had money. He had, if he did not need to eat there, he could have eaten somewhere else after reaching to Kolkata or some places like that. It was during his journey just, right? But if considered the life of lower caste people, the Dalits, they had to face it every day, right? You will not, for probably for generations, you are doomed to and bound to have a very l- less earning job or very low income job, or probably for generations your ancestors and your future generation will just be peasant, landless peasant or sweepers in some instances. Right. So that was the situation in India. However, the constitution in India clearly stated that there should be no differences between people, between the opportunities. There should be no discrimination uh, among the people, or there should be no discrimination in opportunities, right? In justice, in economic system. However, we know that many things are written in the book, but it doesn't count as long as it is not in practice, right? Whether it's about constitution, whether it's about some law, whether it's about written in the religion, it's the practice that counts most. Right. So there was a huge caste system, and based on that caste system, the economy of that region was dictated. Now, how was that? How was uh, uh, now the marginalized communities in India, they were very much oppressed and suppressed. So uh, that was the main agitator of that conflict. For instance, back in the 1953s in Bengal, 93% of arable land was owned by the feudal lords or the jomidar, we can say. So you can understand that most of the people did not have their own land, and if you have to uh, take someone else's land for to grow crop, uh, most of the profit is taken by the owner of that land, right? So it has become now it was a bone of contention. For instance, Ramchandra Guha in 2007 wrote that about 40% of the displaced by the government projects are in tribal region. Since Adivasis constitute roughly 8% of India's population, this means that a tribal is 5 times as likely as a non-tribal to be forced to sacrifice his home and the hearth by the claims and demands of development and conservation. Okay, now this is another point. First one, I was talking about the land of the people. Uh, mm, why it began. Now, this one is about the Adivasi people because the Naxalite movement at some point was very much frequent or very much strong in the Adivasi area. Now, Adivasis, they are a minority in India. Number one. Number two is these people are very much oppressed, and sometimes government make projects, particularly in the 1980s uh, or after 1990s. India focused on neoliberal development project, right? So they were taking lands and they were making big projects. So mostly the Adivasis were being displaced. So that was a source of renewal of Naxalite movement. So now let's see the history of the Naxalite movement. First of all, let's see a quotation written by Rajat Kumar. In 2008, he wrote that in a remote village called Naxalbari in West Bengal, a tribal youth named Bimal Kishan, having obtained a judicial order, went to plough his land on 2nd March 1967. The local landlords attacked him with the help of their goons. The tribal people of the area retaliated and started forcefully recapturing their land. What followed and was a rebellion which left one police sub-inspector and nine tribals dead. So in this statement, we have the summary of the beginning of the movement, right? So what happened? A guy called Bimal Kishan, he went to the court that I own this land. Now I want to harvest this land. So he received the order of the court. So when he received order of the court, he thought, all right, since I have judicial order, since the state has sanctioned me to harvest this land, I will be able to do it. However, the local Jomidar, he did not like it. So what he did, and obviously that person does not have any reason to like it because if every peasant starts doing that, they will be losing their source of income, they will be losing their influence, right? So what did they do? They wanted to deter in the peasant in the old school way, the way they used to deal with the peasants by force, right? However, this time the tribal people protested that they should not be any more submissive to these landlords. So, and a clash erupted. All right, that was the beginning of Naxalbari movement. Now, for uh, for those who are in favor of the Naxal movement, they call it was a reaction to injustice, which is true. Uh, it was just a peasant movement. Look, it was not an armed insurgency. Where will the peasants, the local people, the local peasants, the farmers will get weapons, right? Even the Adivasi people will get weapons unless someone gives them. They do not have enough money just to survive. If they had enough money to survive, they would have sent their offsprings to better places to get educated. They would have built their resources, right? They had barely some money to survive. So how would they get weapons? See, it was a peasant movement, just a movement at the beginning. Now, I also want you to remember that the peasant movement, they belong to the have-not class or the proletariat class. Remember this. So, Naxal people Naxalites, they claimed that it was just a reaction to the injustice. However, since they are the have-not class, and back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, uh, the temptation of Marxism was very, very much high. Once a diplomat from Bangladesh was said that, back in our school days, he's a retired diplomat. Back in our school days, having that red book. a big red book written by Marx, or having the Communist Manifesto was the thing, was the trend. আমাদের যেমন এখন social media is a big trend. It's like, you guys have that thing, many things. I'm not very much aware of that. You guys have things like fit check and other things, right? Back in that time, for educated youth, the youth, the the Red Book or the ideology of Marx or Lenin, the revolution, that was a big idea among the youths. And হবে না কেন? The Gen Z people, consider this age, Gen Z people also think about revolution, think about bringing justice to the society, think about changing the society for betterment. So back in that time, those who were youth, they were uh, they were hanging to that idea as well. The difference is that they thought that the Marxist idea or Leninist idea or revolutionary idea can bring changes, and there was huge political party behind it, the Communist Party of India, Marxist Leninist. All right, they were being supported by China, and there was international politics going on. All right, I'll come to that point now. Soon the Marxists started, Communist Party of India started supporting them, because at the core of the Naxalite movement and at the core of Communist Party of India, there was one thing in common, that both believe they belong, or they want to serve the class of have-not class, or either they believe they belong to proletariat, or they believe that uh, they are serving, or they can serve the interest of the proletariat. Okay, so that is where their interest, the Naxalites' interest, and the Marxist Communist Party of India's interest aligned. All right. However, government authorities label them as terrorists, as anti-state agents, agents of foreign forces, as you can assume that Communist Party of India, particularly the Marxist-Leninist faction that was being uh, uh, supported by outsider, particularly China. Why would China support that? Though it's Leninist and Marxist. Yes, Russia used to support that, but China was heavily supporting them. Why would they do that? Because in 1964, China and India had a war. All right, and given that China and India has direct uh, enmity among them, why wouldn't China support them, right? However, the Communist Party of India, Marxist, they claims that behind the peasant unrest in Naxalbari lies a deep social malady, which is true. Malafide transfers, evictions, and anti-people actions of tea gardeners and jodhars. Uh, yes, that is true. In the Naxalbari movement started in the Adivasi areas and in tea plantation areas. Even if you see the তোমরা যদি একটা দুইটা রিপোর্ট দেখো about the tea gardeners, you will be amazed যে তারা কত কম টাকা ইনকাম করে, ঠিক আছে? Now, YB Chauhan, he says that the basic cause of unrest, namely the defective implementation of laws enacted to protect interest of the tribals, uh, remains. Unless this is attended to, it would not be possible to win the confidence of the tribals, whose leadership has been taken over by the extremists. Now, when did YB Chauhan said that in the causes and nature of current agrarian tensions? Basically, India formed a commission, okay, that this is a problem we are facing. What should we do? We should try to understand it. So let's make a report. And that report was called The Causes and Nature of Current Agrarian Action Tensions. Okay. So in that report, that was a big report. So we have just have one sentence that what that summarizes the basic reason of the conflict. That the basic cause of the unrest is the defective implementation of laws enacted to protect the interest of the tribals. So it would not, again, he was saying it would not be possible to win the confidence of the tribals whose leadership has been taken over by the extremists. Now, by extremists, Mr. Chauhan means that the Communist Party of India or communist insurgents, right? So they need to do something correct. Now, Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninists, they took over the Naxal movement in West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Kerala, Jammu and Kashmir, Odisha, and Bihar. All right, within a short span of time, differences over issue of armed struggle, uh, it started to spread. Okay. In 1970, Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninists, they had their convention, and Charu Majumdar was elected as the general secretary. He was a big revolutionary. You can study about him, you can read about him. In the 1970s, it was the decade of liberation. Okay, because Naxal was very much active in that time, and Charu Majumdar became the Naxal Guru. And the Chinese, after the 1964 war, after seeing India's influence in Bangladesh's liberation war, they became very serious about supporting about supporting the Naxals. Okay, and it was the major party that was leading the Naxal movement. Now, after the death of Charu Majumdar, what happened in 1972? Charu Majumdar died, and he was the big leader. I mean, no one would dare to uh, dare to criticize him like this. Okay. However, he was a charismatic leader to maintain the Communist Party of India under one roof. However, after Charu Majumdar died, Communist Party of India, the Marxist-Leninists, they started to break up, and you have many faction of Communist Party of India. One party like Communist Party of India, Marxist Leninist Liberation. So they say that they are not a believer of Charu Majumdar's guerrilla warfare. Rather, they found that it is better if we try to contest an election. It is better if we give up our guerrilla aspirations and start doing politics. We are at the core a political party. We should do politics. If we can win, we will serve the people. So that was the style. So eventually, the Naxalite movement started to war off. Now, yes, you will still find some Naxals, some last Naxals in areas, but after the fall of Soviet Union, it started to war off. All right. Now, that was the short history of Naxal movement. You can see some reports, some documentaries about Naxal. You search in YouTube. All right, read in online portal. What you have to understand is the origin of Naxal movement or the sources of this conflict of this movement. First, it was the grievance of the peasant that we are oppressed, so we should not be oppressed. The Constitution of India could not, or the law and order of India could not liberate them from their suffering. So what would they do? They protested. Second, their interest aligned with with the Marxist revolutionary groups, particularly Communist Party of India. So they were the forerunner. of the military armed struggle or insurgency in India, right? So they were the forerunner, and their interests aligned together because both of them were fighting or were representatives of proletariat, number one. Number two, their experience of their life made them believe that the only way of achieving uh, their rights or establishing their rights is through armed struggle. Right. So this was your lecture for today, very short lecture. And if you have any confusion, you can ask me.